Welcome to the Garden Angelist, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana.
And I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma. We call ourselves Garden Angelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we want you to love it too.
Yes, we do. We are also authors and invite you to check out our books, including my books, Potted and Pruned, Homegrown and Handpicked, and Seeded and Sodded, my trilogy of gardening humor, and my new book, Creatures and Critters, Who's in My Garden?
And my book, The 20-30-something Garden Guide and No Fuss, Down and Dirty Gardening 101 for anyone who wants to grow stuff. You can ask for any of our books at your favorite bookstore or find them online wherever books are sold.
And speaking of online, you can also find us as the Garden Angelist on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and sometimes Pinterest. And we'd love for you to join our Facebook group, the Garden Angelist Garden Club.
Now on to this week's episode.
Hi, Dee.
Hey, Carol. How's your garden growing?
It's growing very, very well. I have the most amazing cabbage plants I've ever grown.
I saw those and I told you to share them on our Instagram. And
boy, I did.
Those are the best looking, homegrown, organic cabbages I've ever seen.
Thank you. I have put the white horticultural cloth over them the entire time they've been planted. I pull it back just so that I can weed and cultivate, and I put a little organic fertilizer around the base on Saturday, and then I cover it right back up.
Yeah, I wish those cloths worked better in Oklahoma. The wind, no matter what I do, sometimes the wind gets them. But you know what? I'm impressed with your cabbage.
Thank you. I'm impressed with my cabbage as well. In fact, the whole vegetable garden looks as good as it's ever looked, and I think I'm going to have to do a video on Instagram or whatever. I weeded everything. I've cultivated it, tied up my tomatoes. Everything's coming up really well. I'm happy.
That's a good week, man. So in my part of the world, my vegetable garden is growing great. We're in that in-between stage where the spring stuff is finished and the summer stuff is coming on, which means I have a lot of green tomatoes and a lot of green chili peppers. And I did harvest some shishito peppers this morning, and I don't have enough to do anything with, but hopefully they'll start coming on. I love shishito peppers blistered, cooked in a pan. They're so good. And then in the upper pasture, Bill and I have been trying to come up with something because suddenly there's no more rain in Oklahoma, which, according to the weather people, it is the rainiest month of the year, June is, which I would have disagreed, but they should know. And this year, the spigot cut off on June 1st, basically, and we've had no rain. So what lawn I have, which I don't water, is burned up. And the upper pasture where I sowed all those beautiful wildflower seeds, they're doing their best. So Bill and I put a sprinkler in the upper pasture meadow, and we bought one that is mounted on a tripod. That way it gets above the flowers.
That sounds good. And speaking of rain, Dee, have you jinxed me? Because I looked at my records and I haven't gotten rain for 11 days, and I need rain.
Poor
I need
you.
rain. I need rain. I need rain.
So just so people know, we will water this at like 9 p.m. when the sun is starting to go down because it's cooler, you waste less water, et cetera, et cetera. And normally we don't use sprinklers, but in this case, we kind of need one. So
yeah, it's a big area.
It's a big area. I can't just spot water it. I was trying to, but it's not working. So that's our solution.
I did water my vegetable garden this past weekend. I watered it really well because no rain. And I transplanted some zinnias around because I had some spots to fill in. And so I just thought, I'll just water everything.
Good plan.
Yeah, I'm more of a tough love gardener, but stuff's got to be watered.
Yeah, and here you can be a tough love gardener all you want, but everything's going to die if you don't water it. So I always tell people water with either drip irrigation or soaker hoses because you waste less water. And also you don't get water on the leaves and As with zinnias and some other plants, that's not a good idea.
Very good. Well, shall we move on? We have a quote.
Yes, we do. Go for
It
it.
always seems to me as if the lavender was a little woman in a green dress with a lavender bonnet and a white kerchief. She's one of those strong, sweet, wholesome people who always rest you, and her sweetness lingers long after she goes away. Myrtle Reed.
She was an American author, poet, journalist, and philanthropist, and she wrote the novel Lavender and Old Lace in 1902. One of my favorite movies was made from
Yes.
that novel. No, actually, is it? No,
It's a
I don't
play.
think so. Because it's not ours. It's a play, but you said Lavender
Right.
and Old Lace. Arsenic and Old Lace is what I'm thinking of, but maybe different thing altogether. Sorry. Ignore
That's
that,
all right.
people. So our flower this week is lavender.
Lavender. And you know, Dee, it is the year of lavender, according to our friends at the National Garden Bureau, 2020. Year
Yep.
of lavender. That's the herb.
Right. Not to be confused with the year for the flower, but lavender is both a flower and an herb.
That's right. And I did some research and I found out, did you know that there's a United States Lavender Growers Association?
No, I didn't.
Now you know.
Yay. Good to know.
We'll put a link in the show notes.
That's cool. I've been planting lavender all around my potager, my kitchen garden, because I decided I wanted the structure. And also I have honeybees and lots of little bees. I have all kinds of creatures here. And I wanted to feed them too. And so I did. And I've about got it finished. Lavender's kind of expensive. So it's taken me about 2 years. And I still have a couple of places, like I have some tagetes that is a type of marigold, but not marigolds. It's the other one that is a perennial. And it's in the edge of my bed. And I haven't pulled it out yet because I kind of like it, but it might go out this year.
And be replaced with more lavender, right?
Right, exactly. Because I'm really trying to put lavender all the way around. That would look so good. And it'd be so French and, all the things, right?
Oui, oui. So speaking of French, there are two types of lavender. There's English lavender, and then there's French/Spanish lavender. And English lavender is the one that's hardy for you and I.
Right. The Spanish-French lavender is not hardy. And the English lavender is Lavandula angustifolia. And then the other one that is Spanish or French is Lavandula, I'd say it's Stochus, or is it Stachys?
Stochus.
Who knows? So it's a different type of lavender. It has a different flower head on the top of it. And that's okay. It's a great plant and it's really good for containers. And I actually have one that's a standard. And so I put it in a really pretty big terracotta pot because I love terracotta. I love the way it looks, but most everything can't grow here in terracotta. It's too hot. That lavender loves it. So I just bring it into my greenhouse each year.
Yes, because lavender likes it kind of on the hot side and kind of on the dry side. And
I'd say very on the dry side. Very on the dry side.
And so you'll kill it by overwatering it. You'll kill it by mulching it heavily. That's like certain death.
Yeah. In fact, I would say unless you have a raised bed with really good soil, it's certain death. I mean, I've grown it for a few years here and there. And even with all my work on lavender, and it really loves the potager because the bricks on the outside of the potager are made from concrete. And concrete is alkaline. And I'm almost sure that lavender likes alkaline soil. And I think that's why it loves it in that bed. It's really sharp drainage and it's alkaline. And it's hotter than Hades. So that's going to be my guess as to why I have so much success with it now. But if you grow it anywhere, just grow it in a pot or grow it in a raised bed.
Well, and I have some out in my vegetable garden at the end of a bed. And, I have a gigantic rock, which depending on what day of the week it is, sometimes that rock fell from outer space, whatever. But anyway, I bought these two varieties of lavender that I had never heard from a woman named Carol Snyder, who used to own an herb farm. And I ran into her at a Master Gardener event. and she had grown like 70 varieties of lavender. So she knew what grew in Indiana. And so I just picked these two varieties. I long ago lost the tags, but one is sort of a whitish bloom and the other one is more of a purple. And they're huge. They're like 2 feet across. They're huge.
So they like being next to that rock, and you have them
Yep.
in a raised bed, or is it in ground?
It's a raised bed,
Yeah.
but it's like 2 bricks high. It's not that raised, but it is well drained, even though
It's really well drained, though. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the end of the vegetable garden where all the water goes in that direction. But that bed's never in standing water. But it is amazing. And I wish I knew the varieties because I would tell people, hey, these are doing really well.
Well, I can tell a few that are doing well. Did you get a while back, you were going to talk a little bit about different varieties. And one of them was Super Blue. Did you get that from?
It does not ring a bell. I do not think I have Super Blue. I do not think I have that.
Okay, I have Super Blue. And Super Blue is a dwarf variety. It's not very tall. I'd say it's about 1.5 feet tall with blooms on it. So it stays really short. I will say this, it is a beautiful plant. It has a beautiful flower head on top. It does not survive as well in my garden as some of the other varieties, but it is really pretty and it's a really heavy duty blue, and sometimes it reblooms, which is cool.
That is very cool.
And we haven't talked about, there are some other ones that are really popular right now, English lavenders. There's so many different kinds. And
there is.
Lavender Lady, if I remember right, it's an AAS winner and you can grow it from seed. I had no luck with it. Royal Velvet is new to my garden this year.
And I actually, back in the day, I actually grew Lavender Lady from seed. And the deal was it actually bloomed that first year. And so I don't think I have it anymore. Because I feel like if I get 3 to 5 years out of a lavender plant before it's kaput, I've done pretty well. And it's long gone.
Well, so far I'm having pretty good luck with one that you're going to talk about in a minute, which is the cross between Spanish lavenders and the English lavenders. They've been
And which
them.
one is that, Dee?
Phenomenal.
Yeah, I bought Phenomenal 2 years ago. And so actually I planted some lavender between these 2 chairs that are like permanently stationed in my garden.
Right.
It's just nice to rub your hands on the flowers while you're sitting there. And I remember putting Phenomenal there, but I also remember like putting other lavenders there. So I just don't keep track of stuff well enough. So I might have Phenomenal, but it has a really tall flower spike, doesn't it?
Yes, it has a very tall flower spike, and it's a big old plant too. It grows really big. So it's not a dwarf one, but I got to say it's wonderful in my garden. I've heard from some other people it didn't do well in theirs. But remember, Oklahoma's not that high with the humidity, and it just does really well here, and it's a very big plant. Now, having said all that, I've edged these beds, and so I'll have a whole bunch that do really well, and there'll be one that dies. So I have had to replace it occasionally, but a great plant. But I'll be honest, also, whichever English lavender that they sell at Bonnie Plants at the box store, I bought some of those last year, and they're huge too, and they look great. So I think the secret is great drainage, hot sunshine, rocks and bricks.
Exactly.
It likes that.
Exactly.
And then the other part is you're supposed to shear it back after it flowers. Because if it puts a lot of work into the seed heads, I don't think that's really good for it. I think it takes away from the plant's root system because it has to work too hard. And then I just shear it back. And then in the spring, occasionally I've had to cut it back because one of them will send out a big long shoot. And then I liked what you put in the notes here about if you cut it down to the woody part, you've killed it.
Right. It's actually, I think, more what's considered a subshrub. Mm-hmm. So it's not like a perennial that's like a daylily or something like that, which is going to like keep getting bigger and bigger, and you can dig it up and divide it. You cannot do that with lavender.
No.
It's a one stem, and it's more of a subshrub. So don't cut back into the wood and expect it to come out, but do shear it after it's bloomed, and you'll have a better plant.
They get pretty woody in my garden, so occasionally I do have to cut into the wood, but I try not to. So very cool. Anything else you want to say about lavender?
There's the Spanish variety, and I actually have a Spanish variety that was sent to me to trial. And I'm trying to think what the Primavera is the name. And so that's only going to be hardy to zone 7, so it's not going to overwinter my garden. So I'm trying to figure out, I think I should put it in a container, enjoy it in the container, and then kind of figure out if I can overwinter it in that container, like in the garage or something, because it's definitely not going to make it outside.
There's also some crossover between, like, there's a separate group of lavenders that are considered just French. And I was thinking about that as we were talking. So the Spanish one is the one that has the big, huge flower spikes that have the little tuft at the top. But
Yes.
there's also a classic French hybrid that's called Grosso, Grosso. And Grosso is a really good plant. It has wide leaves, and it is one of the early ones that did really well in my garden before I understood how to grow them. So it's considered French, but not like Spanish. And it looks, to me, it looks exactly like English lavender. But I'm be honest, I am not an absolute lavender expert. I just grow it and love it. And I have a bunch of different kinds.
That's right. So shall we move on to...
Yeah, let's move on. But it is, okay, I looked it up on High Country Gardens. So Grosso is Lavandula intermedia.
Ooh.
So maybe it's a cross. I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's a good lavender. There are a bunch of good lavenders. Just give them sharp drainage. Now we can move on.
And I'll put some links to some of these lavenders in our show notes.
Nice, especially Phenomenal and that one that you love so much. Those are really good.
I don't know the name of the ones I love.
Oh, well, then we're in trouble.
Yeah. All right. Here is the rhyme we have for a quote. Cut thistle in May, they grow in a day. Cut them in June, that is too soon. Cut them in July, then they will die.
I wish thistles would die. Thistles are actually aggressive, invasive weeds in Oklahoma. They're on the invasive weed list.
Oh, they're invasive everywhere. And, I feel like, though, I'm getting ahead of them. And I might just be kind of full of myself because the vegetable garden beds are all been weeded and everything. But I feel like that I don't have as many right now. So I'm happy about that.
Do you have thistles in your vegetable bed?
Yeah.
Oh,
I've got some that come up in there.
I have trouble with them more in my perennial beds, maybe because I don't know why. Anyway.
Oh, I have them there too. They just come up and I just keep pulling them.
Well, good for you. I see them a lot on the roadsides in Oklahoma. Now, bees love them because think about all those little tiny flowers that are those little nectaries inside all of the thistliness. Ew.
Well, the reason I had that quote is just because in the vegetable garden, I feel like this is sort of the point where people can let the garden get away from them. The weeds they're like little robbers in the garden. They take up space, they take up nutrients. And so getting ahead of those and this you garden year round, you begin to recognize that weeds have seasons. So in my garden, like chickweed and henbit season is over. And now the purslanes and the thistles are coming along. And so purslane, we talked about that last year. That's like, oh my gosh,
so
that's
much
a devil.
Purslane.
But it's like, and it sort of sounds trite. And I tell people the secret is you just have to keep pulling them.
Right? You have to
pull them under.
And pull them at the base of them. Like try to get the root. You are not always going to get the root, but try. Because I have a lot of trouble with weedy grasses too. Like quackgrass and crabgrass, all of those. And I was outside just before we decided to record. I was outside in my cut flower garden where the sunflowers are. By the way, a sunflower bloomed today. Yay.
Wow.
The first one.
Not here.
One.
Way too early.
I'm ahead of you. Early. Okay, so anyway, there are problems with weeds in that bed, and I'm constantly pulling them out. And what I need to do is put down some mulch, but I haven't done it yet.
What do you mulch in your vegetable garden?
I do. I mulch it. in my vegetable garden, and I also mulch in my cut flower garden. I mulch everywhere. I mean, helps retain water, and eventually gets broken down by worms into the soil, and it stops weeds, some of them.
Yeah, and I usually mulch my beds in the fall. I pick up leaves and crunch them with the mower and put those on the vegetable garden beds. But
Right.
this summer, I think I might put the bag on there and pick up grass clippings and put some of those on my vegetable garden beds just to kind of keep things cool and neat.
Yeah.
Hold me to it, Dee.
I had a friend do that. She dumped all of her grass into her vegetable beds, and just spread it about 2 inches thick all through
I
it.
wouldn't
It
even,
worked.
yeah. My dad always
I
put that in the vegetable garden and it seemed to do pretty well.
I mean, I've done straw before. I've done a lot of things over the years, but right now, I really like shredded pine bark. It doesn't get gross and dry on the top, and it looks good, and it's not cheap, but I like it. And in the fall, I use shredded leaves.
Now, do you fertilize your vegetable garden? And we've talked about this.
No, we haven't actually talked about it because you said that you had fertilized where we talked somewhere else. And then you left the group, and I was like, what do you fertilize with? No, I don't usually. I mulch and I use compost in the spring or fall or both.
Well, I decided that I feel like that my garden just needs a little punch, and maybe it was
Mm-hmm.
because it got a cool start and things aren't as far along as I want. And so I just got an organic fertilizer, an organic liquid fertilizer that you just mix, and I just mixed it in a watering can and poured some at the base of each plant. I don't know if it'll do any good, but we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with adding a little organic fertilizer, either liquid and spraying it or putting it down on the ground or using a granular one. But here's one of the reasons I don't fertilize my vegetable garden. My hound dog loves the smell of dried blood and dried bone, or feathers. Those three things are in a lot of organic fertilizers: feather meal, bone meal, blood meal, right? And
Right.
so he digs in my garden if I put that down. And I did have some trouble with him in the spring because I think I did actually pour a little bit of liquid fertilizer on a couple of plants that looked kind of yellow. And I thought, those don't look right. So I did that, and I'll be darned, he dug them up. So it didn't matter anyway.
Yeah. Now, technically, Dee, we're supposed to tell people that they should have their soil tested before they fertilize. I'm like, oh, I'm not telling people that.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, guys, don't fertilize without testing your soil. But there's so much different soil in Oklahoma in my garden because it's such a big garden, and I've done it so long that I just know it needs certain things. Compost never hurts anything.
No, it
Frankly.
doesn't. And I just look and I say, these plants just look a little puny. And I had this lily of all things in my flower border next to the vegetable garden, and it looked a little yellowish. And so I gave it some of this fertilizer, and I don't know if it's my imagination, but it looked greener today, a couple days later. So,
Yeah, it probably needed a little bit of iron or nitrogen, one
right.
or two. One or the other. One thing about vegetable gardens, though, that we want to all be careful of is not too much nitrogen in the vegetable garden because that attracts pests. Like on tomatoes, if people put too much nitrogen on their tomatoes, they'll grow straight up. You won't get much fruit. And then you end up with a whole bunch of pests. So
Yeah.
just balance. Balance is key, as always.
And I tell people nitrogen for leaves, potassium for flowers, and flowers equal fruit. And so think about what you're doing. And that's where most of these fertilizers are sort of evenly balanced. You do not need a lot of phosphorus at all.
No,
my
most
opinion.
soils in the U.S., you don't, for sure.
So on the bookshelf, Dee,
Yes.
and I don't think we talked about this one. It's called The Herbalist Kitchen, Cooking and Healing with Herbs by Pat Crocker.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the best of both worlds because it's a cookbook and a book about growing the herbs.
I've had it. It's great.
And I thought that's a good one because, you sometimes there's not a lot you can do with cooking with lavender. It's kind of a strong scent, but going back to that one herb, but even lavender, and I had looked this up before to make sure she had a lavender recipe. Yeah. She's got all kinds of information. Yeah, you can put it in cookies. A lot of people make a lavender lemonade. which I've had before
It is
at
good.
restaurants.
It's good.
Delicious. And she's got a recipe for lavender lemonade. But I just thought it was nice because more and more people are interested in growing their own herbs, because if you grow your own herbs, guess what?
What?
You won't put chemicals on them.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, you don't need to put much of anything on herbs. They don't need much. They grow on their own pretty well.
Right.
You know?
And when you're growing herbs and you're eating like the leaves or the flowers or whatever, you can't wash that stuff off. So
No. And not very many creatures eat herbs because they don't like the strong scent, or they don't like the way the leaves are kind of fuzzy.
right.
And depending on the herb. So like if you grow bronze fennel, for example, it tastes like licorice. Deer don't like licorice. The only thing that likes that plant are swallowtail butterflies. And everybody wants more of those.
Exactly. So anyway, I thought this was a good book to highlight, because if you're getting into growing your own herbs and you're like, what do I do with all these herbs? Well, here's a good book that'll tell you how to grow them and how to cook with them.
And that actually kind of leads us into our next segment and our quote, because I can't remember if it was last week's episode of Gardener's World or the week before, and Monty Don was planting an herb garden.
That was must have been 2 weeks
before
ago.
Last?
Yes.
Yeah, because I was out of town, so I watched last week's on the normal day. And then I was on the treadmill yesterday, and I turned on week before last, and he was actually telling us which herbs grow well in shade.
Wow. So we would highlight for people that we really do love this Gardener's World with Monty Don, and he's got a whole cast of characters like Adam Frost and Carol Klein and a few others, and it's just really enjoyable. They're very enthusiastic gardeners, and I always learn something.
I always learn something from it too, and we've both been gardening for a long time, which kind of leads us into our quote from Monty Don.
Go for it.
The more I garden, the less I know, but the more pleasure I get from it.
That's a very good quote.
That's the truth, man. I mean, I thought I knew a lot about gardening, but I mean, I've been doing this since I was a teen. And the more I do it, the more in depth it is. It's one of those subjects, just like us talking about lavender. There are so many kinds of lavender now, and it's so confusing. And so we tell people like the simple stuff, but there's always so much more to learn. And it can lead you down a real rabbit hole.
Right. And yeah, I mean, if you think about my friend Carolee Snyder, that she once grew 70 varieties of lavender. It's like we barely scratched the surface.
Yeah. I think I have 5 types in my garden. 5.
I don't. And you know what? The more I garden, the less inclined I am to keep labels and know what the heck I'm growing. My bad.
Well, I have a bad habit about that too. I had to label everything for the Daylily regional that we had here a few years ago, but I don't know. I look at stuff and I think one of the hard parts is when we get trial plants and they're perennial or shrubs, and then you have to go back to Darwin perennials and try to figure out which version of spirea they sent you 5 years ago. You know, and yeah, right. I should keep all that data, but I don't always. And by the way, I really like that spirea from Darwin Perennials, but I'll have to go research it to tell you what it is. It's a beauty. It's a beauty. You can watch Gardener's World, and on Gardener's World, they do the same thing. And they will also tell you sometimes, well, Carol Klein always knows what her plants are because she was a plants woman and also owned her own nursery. But they will say, we don't know everything about gardening. We know a lot. And I would say Michael and I would say the same thing. Right.
And so you can go to Britbox, and it's not that expensive to subscribe to Britbox, and they have Gardener's World, and you can almost see it like they do it Friday night, which is hours ahead of us. And so by the time you get to Friday night, the episode is on Britbox, and you can just stream it live. And then you get all those other British shows we like.
You get everything from the Chelsea Flower Show, when they have the Chelsea Flower Show, but you also get almost all of the British mysteries, and I think it's $6.99 a month. And I actually watch mine on Apple TV, And used to be we could only watch Gardener's World on YouTube, remember?
Yeah, we'd have to try to find it somewhere.
Oh, it was really hard. And half the time it was wrong, and then they pulled it down because it wasn't legal. But now this is a legal way to watch Gardener's World, which makes me very happy.
So after you listen to our podcast, then you can watch Gardener's World.
Yeah, watch Gardener's World. It really is good.
That's good. So that's our show for this week, middle of June. We want to thank everybody for listening to The Garden Angelist. If you like our podcast, please tell your friends about us.
And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review. That helps us get noticed by the algorithm and other people.
Yes, and be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the Garden Gate today. Bye until next week.
Bye.